In April 2025, the North Atlantic stretched out in creepy darkness. No stars, no light, only the seemingly endless black water bearing the symbol of American muscle. A 100,000-ton nuclear aircraft carrier, supported by destroyers and submarines, cutting through the waves like a floating fortress. For the 5,000 crewmen aboard, it was just another routine patrol away from home. But in Moscow, a lethal plan was already underway. Twist. Suddenly, radar screens flashed. The unthinkable had started. 30 Russian cruise missiles charged towards the carrier from warships. Another 20 blasted upwards from beneath submarines. And above them, a swarm of 50 kamikaze drones loaded with explosives swooped down like predators on the hunt. Emotional hook. It was the century's biggest coordinated naval raid. A tri-pronged assault designed to cripple the U.S. Navy's heart. A direct threat to American dominance. And a message no citizen could ignore. Twist. It was 4:30 a.m. when alarms broke the stillness, and the tranquility of the deck gave way to pandemonium as sailors ran to stations with armed guns and the captain's bellowing voice on the intercom. All hands brace for impact. This is not a drill. Emotional punch. In seconds, the black sky was ablaze with streaks of fire as the initial salvo of Russian missiles flashed across radar, glowing red as daggers hurtling directly towards the carrier. But America was prepared. Aegis destroyers bathed the darkness, firing SM-6 interceptors at close to Mach 3.5, ripping through missiles in succession with blinding flashes. Within 2 minutes, over 20 Russian warheads were destroyed in midair. But the true storm was just starting. But the horror wasn't done yet. From under the sea, submarine-launched missiles climbed higher, faster, and more deadly than ever before, compelling the carrier's second line of defense to come to a thundering life. Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles burst from vertical launch cells, slicing into the black sky and tearing apart the undersea-launched warheads with precision surgery. The sea trembled as blazing pieces fell into dark waters. High-energy laser beams latched onto the approaching wave of suicide drones from above the carrier, slicing through fuselages and wings, sending blazing wrecks crashing into the sea. Emotional impact. However, there were numbers to count. Out of 50 drones, 48 were destroyed, but 2 evaded destruction, crashing into the stern with deafening fireballs. The blasts tore through deck plating, seriously injuring 3 sailors and burning or shredding 5 others by shrapnel. Twist. The carrier remained steady, but the shock could not be denied. Russia had blooded America. Yet, if the Kremlin believed this would break America's spirit, they were badly wrong. As medics scrambled to the wounded, orders crackled through the fleet. Prepare to strike back. Emotional hook. In seconds, the launch bays yawned open, spewing forth 80 U.S. drones with precision microbombs, their engines screaming as they flooded into the black sky. By chaotic waves of 10, they juked radar and cut through Russian defenses, destroying well over 40 radar arrays and missile stations in minutes, leaving enemy vessels blind. Twist. And then the second hammer blow. 30 U.S. unmanned fast attack boats, loaded with 500 pounds of explosive, charged 60 knots into a tempest of tracer fire. 17 broke through, crashing into Russian hulls in ruinous kamikaze attacks. 2 destroyers were sunk in less than 5 minutes. 1/3 frigate burned impotently, and over 300 Russian sailors were driven into the icy waters of the Atlantic over open radio frequencies. Desperation clung to the air as Russian commanders yelled for air support that never came, their voices breaking as their proud fleet disintegrated around them. Twist. The shame was complete. A fleet that had fired over 100 combined weapons in its initial strike was now disintegrating under the onslaught of faster, deadlier, smaller American systems. For U.S. sailors, this wasn't defense, it was revenge. 8 Russians were injured, 3 of them critical. And now the Navy replied with righteous outrage, launching precise surgical strikes that made Russia's gamble its own hell. Emotional punch. Under the sea, an American attack submarine moved quietly, then launched 12 Tomahawk missiles, each tipped with a 1,000-pound warhead. Gliding low over the horizon, unseen in the darkness, they struck at Russian command vessels and ammunition dumps. 1 missile destroyed a frigate's bridge, killing its officers on the spot. Another ripped through an ammunition magazine, causing an explosion so furious that it sent shrapnel hundreds of feet in the air. Twist. When the barrage had finished, 2 Russian warships were burning hulks, and more than 150 sailors were dead or missing. But America's fury was not yet over. Soaring over the waves, 4 U.S. Navy choppers thundered into darkness, each loaded with Navy SEALs and miniguns that spewed 4,000 rounds per minute. They scorched enemy decks with blazing tracer fire, slicing through defenses and leaving survivors desperately seeking cover with no place to hide. The difference was savage Russia had committed to weight and complexity, but it was shattered by America's tiered precision. Missiles from the deep, helicopters from the heavens, and soldiers with unbreakable discipline. Twist. On Russian channels, panic turned to desperation. Captains pleaded for extraction, gunners blazed wildly at nothing, and eventually, a haunting message crackled over. "We cannot hold. The fleet is lost." At sunrise, the North Atlantic was no longer a battlefield but a graveyard. The powerful Russian strike group was scattered. Steel bent, oil afire, voices silent. Of 8 massive warships, but 3 floated, disabled in a fire, the others lying at the bottom, testament that the sea now belonged to the U.S. Navy. Subsequent reconnaissance verified the astonishing cost. More than 600 Russian sailors killed, 400 injured, and at least 200 captured, many shaken out of the icy Atlantic by American helicopters. Twist. On deck, the scenes told a tale of disintegration. Russian prisoners, covered in thermal blankets, sat under guard. There were some with their heads hung low in shame, others berating their panicked officers, and others cried. For soldiers promised glory, the shame was intolerable, emotional hook. On the American side, the lesson was unmistakable. Discipline and precision had overwhelmed arrogance and chaos. 12 Tomahawks launched from submarines, 4 helicopters carrying 20 SEALs, 80 UAVs, and 30 fast attack craft had wiped out an entire Russian battle group in less than 2 hours. Twist. As damage control teams repaired the carrier's battle-scarred stern, Navy medical personnel stabilized the casualties. 3 critical, 5 more injured. Still, the carrier itself remained, runways unobstructed, ready to combat, a living embodiment of American strength unwilling to break emotional punch. In Washington, photos of Russian warships on fire shocked the country. War veterans at home in their living rooms witnessed history repeat. When America is attacked, it becomes more powerful. Russia had bet all on one colossal hit and lost everything. By morning, the battlefield was a cemetery. Russian vessels amounting to ruins, oil, and stillness, with the American carrier continuing on surprise. For the millions of older Americans, many of whom had endured the Cold War, the message could not be clearer. The Navy is still the Republic's shield, its will unbroken. It was not technology, but training, discipline, and sacrifice.